Thank you, Dan. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. So for me, it's evening on June 17th, and I think it's June 18th there in the morning. So that's just really blowing my mind. So the sun is starting to set here in California. I know I see one familiar face, Katerina is in Washington, D.C., so it's nighttime there. And then a lot of you are just starting your day. So thank you for being here and taking the time out of your day to join me for this. So I'm going to do a screen share right now. And Dan, you will tell me if I get this right. Hopefully this will work. Can you see the future of now? Awesome. All right, I'm going to show you some slides, but then it's not going to be about slides. It's going to be about diving in and having some fun. So a few of the norms for our session tonight, tomorrow, today, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world, have your camera on because you're going to be working with a partner and you need to be able to see each other. So that's pretty important for what we're trying to do. Be present and try to close your other windows. It is very tempting, I know, to have other windows open, but do your best to be present in the moment, especially when you're working with your partner. Don't apologize. We are all at home. Maybe if you're lucky, you're back in your office, but most of us are at home, so there may be pets, there may be partners, kids, roommates, anyone coming in. It's okay. Don't worry about it. My dog might bark too, but don't apologize. And embrace the awkward. Improv is all about embracing it, being in the moment, be comfortable with it. It is a little awkward over this medium, but we can also have a lot of fun here together. So I say just embrace it. Stand up if you can, if you are physically able, and if the space you're in will allow you to stand. I'm standing, Dan is standing. I find that it gives me more energy and it makes it like being, and like, actually, let's stretch. Thank you. Let's just do a stretch before we get started. Even if you're not standing, put your hands up in the air and just stretch. It feels so good to move. We stare at these screens all day. I know I get some serious Zoom fatigue, and I'm guessing I'm not the only person. So a few more norms. When I ask you all if you understood something, give me a thumbs up. It's just much easier, and let's practice. Say, yeah, I got it. I can see it. Yeah, you heard me, you got it. If you have a question, you can raise your real hand. You can also use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or you can enter it in the chat. And between Dan and myself, we'll try to see if you've got your hand raised or you have a question. Jazz hands, that's our applause. When somebody is brave enough to try something, we celebrate it with some jazz hands, which is fun to do. Celebrate mistakes. This is actually a moment when I'd like you to unmute everybody, Dan, because I want everybody to practice what we do in improv. When we make a mistake, instead of apologizing and going, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed, we put our hands in the air and we say, woohoo! So I want everybody to try it. Woohoo! Woohoo! You can do louder than that. Woohoo! 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 So when we make a mistake, instead of apologizing, we say woohoo, and we move on, because we do make mistakes. Be generative. This is one of the foundational principles of improv. When somebody gives you something, says something, you say yes and you build on it. Instead of saying, no, you're wrong, no, that's not it, you say yes and. So this is something we're also going to be doing. So I want everybody to practice. Say yes and.
Yes,
yes
and.
and.
Yes,
so it'll
yes,
make sense once we start playing one of the games. You can mute them again, Dan, while I talk a little bit more, and then soon we will dive into some of the games. So what we're going to do today is we are going to first, Dan and I will model a game for you. Then we will send you to your breakout room to play the game. Then we'll come back together and we'll debrief it. And I always like to follow this format, model, play, debrief, because before I have people do one of these games, it's good to show them what it looks like. Then you go do it, and then we reflect on it. But the important thing about today is just connecting and listening to each other and having fun. That's why we're here, to connect with people around the world, listen to each other, and have some fun together. So improv, we're here to do improv. I'm really curious who has done any improv. I would love to know, just with a raise of hands. Love to see, just get an idea. So a few folks have done it. Has anyone done no improv? Raise your hand. That's totally cool too. Done no improv. That's okay. When I first took improv, so I've been studying improv for about 15 years at a couple of places here in the San Francisco Bay Area. When I first took it, I thought that improv looked like this. I thought it was people on a stage with lights and costumes and looking beautiful and a big audience. And that's what I thought it was about. And it can be like this, but that's not what we are doing today. What I discovered that improv can be looks more like this. This is at the Google Design Sprint conference that Dan mentioned in October in Boulder, Colorado. This is about people connecting and listening and talking and being present with each other. And it can even look like this, solo reflective work as well. Now these photos are back from the old days when we could all be together in person. It feels like a million years ago. Now it looks like this in our current world where we do this over Zoom or other video conferencing platforms. But improv, what it's about, what I discovered after doing improv, studying improv, and really digging into it, I learned that it's about actually slowing down and listening to each other, connecting with other people, being present. This is what it's all about, and why it's so powerful and can be so powerful in the workplace, in creative collaborative work, and supporting each other. And all of this you'll get to experience in today's session. A definition of improv that I really love is from this organization, Bay Area Theater Sports, which is where I've studied improv here in the San Francisco area. Radical cooperation in action. And that's what this is about, radical cooperation. You are cooperating and working with each other. So it's not about being on the stage and being funny and performing, it's about cooperating and working together. So why improv? Why did Dan think that this was worth talking about? Why are organizations interested in bringing this into their work and introducing it to their teams? Well, improv builds team trust. It's very important to trust each other in improv. It builds trust. It promotes empathetic listening, which is absolutely important if you do design thinking work, design sprints, or any kind of work where you have to listen to each other. It fosters comfort with ambiguity. And the world we live in right now, there's a lot of ambiguity, and the work many people do, there may often not be clear-cut answers. And improv helps us be comfortable with ambiguity, situations where we don't know where we're going to end up. We don't know what's going to happen when we get out on the other side. Helps us generate breakthrough ideas. If you're working in an organization that develops products or services, you may be working to generate new offerings, and improv can help us get to those breakthrough ideas. And it catalyzes creativity because it's about saying yes and coming up with generative, lots of ideas. Speaking of creativity, I just love this quote from Abraham Maslow: almost all creativity involves purposeful play. So improv, you can consider it as purposeful play. There's a purpose to this. This is something playful, and there is a reason why we do it. In my work, I align all the games to the frameworks from design thinking as it's taught at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, and also to the design sprint framework. But you don't have to work with these frameworks to get something out of it. I use this in my work, all of my facilitation work, my design research work, my design thinking work. I'm very mindful of when I use these games. And the most important thing here is that these are not just icebreakers or warm-ups. These are games that really flex skills and mindsets that are essential to creative collaborative work. So let's dive in. I like to tell people, I often get asked to give talks about this, and I say no. I don't give talks on this because this is like talking about swimming, where it's just going to be weird and you're just going to be looking at me like, what are you talking about? You have to get in the water. So I always want people to actually play these games, not just have me talk about it in this abstract sense. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to play our first game. So Dan, I will need you to help me. This is the game we're going to model. And then what's going to happen is everybody will go in their breakout room with a partner and they'll play the game. So we're going to show you what this game looks like, and then you will be sent to a breakout room, and you will have about 4 minutes to play the game with your partner. So this game is called Shared Memory. And the way it works, the premise is that you and your partner are siblings, and you're having a shared memory about something from your childhood, anything. And the only rule is you say yes and to each other, and you build on their ideas. You don't say no and shoot down their idea. You say yes and you have a fictional shared memory that you create together. So Dan and I are going to model this game just for very briefly, and then you'll go play it with your partner. And remember, if you're playing it and you mess up, you just go, woohoo, it's okay. So Dan, do you remember that time when we were little and we went to the beach?
Yes, and you wore that big hat.
Yes, I wore that big hat and you were so embarrassed. You were pretending that we weren't related. You were acting like you didn't know me.
Yes, Sam, but I really wanted to eat ice creams and not look at your big hat.
I know, yes, and you wanted to eat ice cream so badly that I said, fine, Dan, I'll spend my allowance and I will buy you an ice cream because you were my little brother. So remember, we walked over and I bought you an ice cream.
Yes, and I dropped it on the pavement as we got outside.
Yes, and then you started crying and I felt so bad for you. You were crying, you had tears coming down your face and my hat blew off my head. So we had to go tell Mom and Dad what had happened.
Yes, and you blame me.
Yes, I did, because I always blamed you for everything.
Yes, and that's okay. But I got you back. I wore
Yes.
a hat for the rest of the day.
Yes. Okay, and scene. Thank you. So that's it. We just made this up on the spot. We actually didn't practice this. I just explained to Dan how the game works. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to go into a room with your partner and you're going to play the shared memory game. We may have one group of 3 if we have an odd number. Actually, I see we have someone in the waiting room. I'm going to
we got another person. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm not going to be joining you, or I might join somebody else. I was organizing it. Okay, so I had Helen.
So if we do have one group of 3, that's okay, because then you can be 3 siblings and figure out who's the oldest, who's the youngest, who's the middle one. Doesn't matter. So you're going to go to a breakout room. You're going to play the shared memory, and then we will come back together and we will debrief the game. And Dan, you can paste those instructions in the chat right now, or if it's too complicated, I could also do it.
I'll do it right now. It's fine.
Okay, and then we're going to send you to your breakout room, and you will play the shared memory game with your partner. So you should see the instructions, and we will see you back here in 4 minutes, and have fun in your breakout room.
I'm just checking everyone's got a pair. Yep. Everyone except me. I will see. I'm going to join one of you, so I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to join yet because I haven't worked it out. All right, see you all soon.
Okay. So everybody write the last line that was spoken in your group in the chat. Fun, empathy. Katerina, I'd like to hear about the empathy piece, so you can unmute yourself.
I was chatting with Pia, and I think it just really made me understand how I just connect to someone I haven't met before, and I'm tuning in to what they say so that the story can flow. So I guess, you know, we just were making up memories on the spot, but they still had to somehow make sense and, you know, be able to resonate. So kind of anticipate, but then also embrace what change was there.
Ah, interesting. Anticipate. So you're kind of anticipating what Pia was going to say.
Well, I hope so. I mean,
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because you can't control what you're going to get from your partner because it's improvised. It's made up on the spot. Pia, you wrote something. You felt a strong connection to Katerina, even though you're at opposite ends of the globe. That's really, so she's in Washington, D.C. and you're in Australia.
Yes, that's right. And we just kind of exchanged names, and I said, wow, that's fabulous. I can be talking to someone in Washington, D.C. We just jumped straight in. And I feel like I don't know, Katerina, some of those conversation pieces were real for me, real memories. And I suspect maybe for you as well. So I kind of feel like I know you even a little bit. And I really like you.
Yeah, same here. See?
I think that's just so cool that you met each other for 4 minutes in your other parts of the globe, and there was this connection. I'm curious, somebody said, Joanna, you said fun at times that we were together, but that felt uncomfortable. So say a little more about running out of ideas and how it felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, so it was really fun. I really, I had fun doing it. But sometimes I felt like my mind was not fast enough. And so like I was trying to, like my mind was like trying to figure out what's the next thing to say. So like maybe 2 times it kind of felt uncomfortable. Yeah.
And I think that that's something with improv where you can do this more and you start to feel more comfortable, because maybe there's this feeling like I have to perform or I have to do it right. I don't want to sound stupid. And improv helps us accept that and be in the moment, that you're not going to say the most brilliant thing, and that's okay. It's building that muscle of embracing that ambiguity or being uncomfortable or feeling like you have to go fast. And that's deliberate. And one of the things about improv is building trust. Like, that's okay. Whatever you give me is okay. Whatever I give you is okay. And we will both be okay with that. So I think it's important to embrace that feeling. So thank you for sharing that and being honest about that. Anybody else want to share how that experience was for you? You could raise your hand. You could unmute yourself. David, you can unmute yourself. David, looks like you're joining us from the moon or from the somewhere in another galaxy.
Well, in orbit, it's always day and it's always night. So
yeah.
The weird thing was that I took on a very different role than I've ever had before. So in our game, I was the older brother and I'm the youngest of 7. So
wow.
I've never had that. It was like a total role I've never even thought about, never been in, suddenly thrown into it.
That's very cool. So how was it?
Weird.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because as an older sibling, I imagine, you have to worry about your behavior because you've got younger siblings watching, whereas I never had to.
Yeah. So what did you do when you were given that by your partner? That's what you were given. How did you work with it?
Initially panic. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you go, well, okay, I've got to step up. You know?
Yeah. That's a really interesting, I love that. I've never heard anyone share that, but that's another great example with improv, how you work with what you're given. And it's kind of like work where you may be given something by a colleague, by a boss that you are not comfortable with, or something you've never done this type of project before, but you have to roll with it and work with it. So this is an example of these muscles that improv can help flex. I'm curious from the group, why do you think we might do something like this? Besides it's fun and it helps people who are in Washington, D.C. and Australia feel connected. Why else might we do something like this? Why would you do a game like this? I'd love to hear. Emma has a hand raised. So yes, please tell us. What do you?
I think, I said it in my role, often you go into workshops and you're trying to get people just to start off on the right foot because they're often so focused on their last meeting or their last email that they read. And this is a really good way of getting them to start off on that creative journey, especially if it's like an ideation type workshop, because straight away I've forgotten what my last email was already, or I've got my last team's meeting or whatever it was. I'm already now thinking of, different things already and different journeys. So yeah, I think it really completely resets the thought process.
Right, so resetting the thought process and helping you be in the moment, not thinking about emails or meetings or other things that might be going on. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, helps you get in there. Many of these activities and games, you can't, while you're playing them with a partner, you can't be doing Slack and email and multitasking because you're working with a partner. So they help you be present and be accountable to your partner, because it's so hard in this digital space to be focused. I know we've got so many other things and messages popping up. I'm curious to hear from other people how this was. I see some, Hayden said, open mindset, generate laughter, drive creativity. and then psychological safety for people. Can you tell us a little more about that? And unmute yourself because you're mute. Yeah, there you go.
I work in a financial institution, and you know, getting people to be creative and get them thinking differently to how perhaps they're used to being driven or used to doing things in a very process and regulated environment. It requires improv at any session that you run, and what it does is you need to create that sense of psychological safety for people, so they feel like they can be expressive and they feel like that they are not going to be laughed at with their ideas or suggestions or things that they're trying to get onto the table, solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that psychological safety, and depending on what kind of environment you said financial services, is that what you said you work in?
Yep.
Yeah, which I would imagine maybe people are very analytical, or they think in a very linear fashion, and maybe don't consider themselves to be creative. And these are things you can do to help people loosen up and feel comfortable. Somebody else, Rebecca, had a comment about a good way to show people who don't consider themselves to be creative that are equally imaginative. Yes, absolutely. Because we all have this imagination. We all have this playfulness that maybe as adults we start to put away and say, well, that's just for kids. But we all have it inside of us. And this is giving ourselves the permission to do this, to be creative, to be playful. And these are things that you can just set aside 5 or 10 minutes to do. You don't have to spend 2 hours out of everyone's precious meeting time doing this kind of stuff. You can just do this for 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to wrap up this game and go on to the next one so that we do not run out of time. Just to wrap this one up and kind of tie up why we did this. This is a game that really helps people get in that generative mindset. So I use this game when I'm doing something that I want people to be creative and generative and do brainstorming and generate lots of ideas. But you also could use it, what Emma brought up, something just to ground people and help them feel centered when they're just starting in a meeting or kicking off a workshop. But I specifically use this when I'm using anything in the ideation phase of design thinking, or in design sprints, it's called sketch. This is the divergent brainstorming where you're generating lots and lots of ideas. And I find that if I have more time with a group, sometimes I'll have people practice saying no but to each other. And then we do it again and we say yes and we compare and contrast. What does it feel like to say no but? And then what's it like to say yes and see how when you say yes and you get somewhere. And when you say no but, you don't get anywhere. Every idea gets shut down and closed down, and there's no conversation. There's nothing there because everything is just no, 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 no but. Okay, we're going to do another game. This one, we're going to need 2 volunteers to help Dan and I demo this game. So it'll be me and Dan, and I need 2 volunteers who are willing to help me. So who are our 2 volunteers? Can
I nominate 2 people?
Pardon me? Yes, or you can nominate 2 people.
Yeah, I'm going to nominate Brendan and Cindy. Cindy looks like I'm going to engage. All right, I'm going to come off and mute, guys.
Okay. All right, so let's write. So the order we've got is, are you going to write the order, Dan?
Okay, well, you tell me, and I'll put the order in.
Yeah, so it'll be me, Dana, Dan, and then who are the others? Cindy and Brendan. Do you all know each other in real life?
I know Brendan, but I don't know Cindy.
So this game is a word at a time game. And the way it works is we go word at a time, and we're trying to come up with a proverb or something that feels very deep and meaningful. And when we feel like we've got to something that feels like you'd see it on a poster in an office or on a t-shirt, everybody goes deep thoughts. And then we go on and we make another one. And maybe we'll come up with something, maybe we won't, and we'll just kind of feel that we know when we've got it, and we all go deep thoughts, and then we make up another one. So we go a word at a time. So there's the order. So we speak in this order: Dana, Dan, Cindy, Brendan. So let's go. Don't worry about it. We mess up, we go woohoo. So I'm going to start. Always.
Where.
Right. Passion.
What do we hear? Always wear
Bright.
Passion.
Always, I think that's it. Deep thoughts. All right, let's do another one. Dan, you want to start?
Wednesday.
Is.
Always. Bright.
Wednesday is always, I couldn't hear you.
Bright. Bright.
Deep thoughts. Let's do one more. I'll start. Never.
Eat.
Blue. Weakness.
Deep thoughts. So you can make these up about anything. Good starter words are always, never, remember, once, just, it doesn't matter. And do multiple ones. If you make up one, I want you to keep going. Don't just stop and stare at each other. Do multiple ones. And I've had teams come up with ones that are so good, they had to print it on a t-shirt. So we're going to send you into rooms of 4 to 5. When you get to your room, decide on your order so that you know who's going, and then come up with your proverbs. When you feel like you've got it, deep thoughts. You may not come up with it. We happen to do it in 4 words. It may take a couple rounds, or you may do it in 3 words. So we're going to send you in room groups of 4 to 5 and come up with a couple of your deep thought proverbs, and then we'll come back together. So Dan.
That was really good. I've got to say, Dana, I've never done that one remotely, and I thought it was really good. And so when we've done it in the past and we've done it in person, we haven't nominated an order. People would just come in. So it was interesting to actually do an order, because people I found in our group were trying to remember the order as well as think of a word.
Yeah, order with remote is a challenge. So you can do other things. You can do is people can rename themselves in their name, like 1-Dan, 2-Dana. You can even hold up a piece of paper with a number. You can write it on a sticky there. You can write it in the chat. There are lots of ways to establish order, but yes, it is harder in the virtual space than it is in a real room with people. Somebody said coffee mug slogans abound, t-shirt worthy, unpredictable, less daunting than the first game. Interesting. 5 people was a challenge. 4 or 6, yeah. You can do this with many different sizes of people. I've done this in a room of 20 people, in 20, 30 people standing in a circle. You can do it with just 2 people. You can play around. All these games, you can adjust and adapt and play with them. That's one thing I like to tell people, that you can mix this up. You can try, you can change things. People come up with different variations of games all the time. Interesting. Aki said you found it harder than the first game. I'd love to hear more about that. Why did you find it harder?
I think naturally when I speak, I like to speak and think in stories, and I have like a connection in my mind. So for the first game, it was like a different mindset as well. I think I was the younger sibling, so I had a bit more of like this creative, I felt like I could let loose, whereas like when you come up with one word, it's just one word and it doesn't really hold much meaning until it's all connected together. So it wasn't really until the end that you could find out what everyone's word sort of meant, and that was a bit difficult for me. So
yeah. Now that's a great observation, because in these word at a time stories, you don't have control, because you're going back and forth with your partner, and that can be sometimes challenging. Sometimes you have a word in your mind and your partner doesn't say that word, and maybe you don't know where it's going to end up, and it can meander. So it can be challenging and harder to give up that control, but it also can be interesting to see where it ends up, because you're co-creating together. Or sometimes your partner might say a word you had in your mind, and then it's like, yes, that's the word I wanted it to land on. So it's challenging, and it's fun to play with these games. You can also try it where people say 2 words or 3 words, and you can play around with these different formats with these games. So that's a great reflection, and thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to wrap this up so we can end on time on the hour and have a few moments for questions, because Dan's reminding me about the time. So just to wrap up this game, And I do this game at the end of a workshop, a design sprint. It's a really nice closing game. And often I'll have people reflect on the experience we just had together in a word at a time. So this is a nice way to wrap something up. And it also is a nice way to have people co-create something together. But it's also a game that gets you flexing that skill where there's some ambiguity and you don't know where it's going to end up, and you have to work together to bring it together. So again, I use this at the end of a design sprint. I use it if I'm doing a post-mortem meeting. I can use it if it's before a group's giving out a presentation. It's just a nice closing activity or game. So I'm going to share slides one last time for one final slide, and then we have time for a few questions. I will stay after the hour, but for people that have to move on to another meeting, we will wrap up. So I'm going to share a slide. And
also, just Dana, I just want to say as well, I'm going to be sharing all the links in the chat, and I'll share them in the email, and I'll share them on the article as well.
Okay, great. So can you see the slide that's a summary of principles? Yes, okay. So just to wrap up what we did today, one of the principles of improv is be present, which you all embodied beautifully. You have to be present to do these games because you have to be tuned into your partner. Slow down and listen. This is about listening to each other. Build on ideas. This is the classic improv principle, yes and. You don't get anywhere without building on each other's ideas. Celebrate mistakes. That's the woohoo that we did. Embrace ambiguity, because these games, this is improvisation. It's ambiguous. There is no clear outcome. And support each other. This is about making each other feel safe, feel comfortable. In improv, there's a saying, make your partner look good. And when you're on stage performing, you want to make each other look good. It's not all about one person. It's about the whole ensemble. It's about supporting each other and making a safe space for each other. Just a nice quote about improv from Psychology Today. Improvisation builds agility, resilience, quick thinking, and ease with ambiguity. These are all important things in today's world, in today's workplace. So I just love this quote. More games. We only had time to do 2 games. There are many, many, many more games that I like to play. On my website, there is, I have physical cards that you can order, but I also have these print at home cards that have been adapted for remote work, and it's pay what you can. So you can go to my website and you can download them for free. It's a pay what you can model, and they're all games adapted for remote virtual work. So many, many more games than we have time to play today. I'm doing another workshop, but I realize for people in Australia, this is the middle of the night. It's June 24th at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. But if you are in Australia, I think that's like 2:30 a.m. So I don't expect to see a lot of you there. But if you are really interested and I hear from enough people, I can run one at this time that would work for all of you. I'm happy to run one if I have enough people that would be able to sign up. I'm going to stop sharing and let us go to questions and discussion. And again, if you have to leave right on the hour, that's fine. But if you want to stay, I can hang out and answer questions and have some discussion. So any questions people have, Dan and I can keep an eye on the chat, or you can raise your hand.
I was just going to say, Dana, we can also share the whole, share your event in the LinkedIn community, and that way we can get other people along as well. And and we can also run another improv session through the future of now. I'll be happy to. I'm sure if there's, because it's just been it's been brilliant. So, does anyone have any questions before we close out?
Please, I see Pia has a hand up.
Okay, do you ever throw in an improv game when a team is stuck?
All the time, yes. And this is the kind of thing where in the physical world, I would read the room. In the virtual space, I have to read the faces and the body language of what I'm getting from the group. And I decide this group seems stuck, this group is If it's a group that's checked out, it's a group that's two in their head, it's a group, it depends on what's going on in the room.
And then you choose a card, wouldn't you? You choose one of these
exactly.
cards.
Thank you. I mailed those cards to Dan in Australia, and he mailed me some cards.
Yeah, I had the band, but it's on my bike because I use it to fix my iPhone so I can watch Netflix when I'm cycling. On the spot, obviously. Yeah. Anyone else? I'll go for it, Brendan. What's your question? Come off of mute.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Great session. I like at the start how you sort of set conditions really clearly about cameras on, some ground rules. But one thing I find with my clients are really conservative. And even to try to do like a pulse check or a temperature check, they'll be upfront. They go, this is fluff, this is piss, what are we doing this for? And look, all my clients are defense industry, so it's really serious business for them to take an hour out of their day. What is the best way you find for a really conservative group of clients to do something where you know they're not going to do something like what we've done today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get this question all the time. How do you do this with different types of groups, with executives, with groups that are very serious? First of all, I read the group. And if it's a really, really serious group, I might only try one game. I'm not going to try all the games. I have to use my best judgment. I might not do the game in the beginning. And you can also do a game that is a very quick, simple game where we wouldn't spend that much time on it. So I might just take 5 minutes out of the agenda to use the game and not do as long of a debrief. It really depends on the group. But one of the things that I find with people who are skeptical or they're saying, why are we doing this? I might share with them the research on play and creativity, because there's science and research behind this. So the people who really need to be convinced with this, I would share with them, well, here's an article you can read. You can go read a whole book on this so that it's not just me making the stuff up. Often that helps. One thing I do really like about doing this over Zoom is people are in a breakout room so they don't feel self-conscious. So if you have people who are skeptical or very serious, if they're in a breakout room, it's not like they're in a room in front of everybody. It's more private and they're in their own home, like if we're on Zoom, and that also actually helps in those situations. I found that when I do this in a space when people are dressed up very formal, they might be less likely to be comfortable, but everyone's at home now and people are more comfortable. So that actually can work to your advantage. But I definitely I played this game in very serious situations and I have to use my judgment. How far can I push the group? Sometimes you can really push them. Sometimes you can't, but I'll often see when I play these games, they slowly start to smile and the crossed arms become uncrossed and you just see it happening. And often with the yes and game, they start to smile because everybody just can't help smiling when you play these games. But it's a great question. And I've definitely done this in some very serious groups. Other questions?
Dana, if I can just add to that as well, whilst we get another question, something I've found is that I actually open with a game like this.
You say that again?
Tone. I open with something like this just to set the tone. So like, you know, before they even have a chance to sit down and fold their arms, I'm like, everybody out your seats, we're going to play this. And before they even know what's hit them, I've set the tone, they know what to expect from the workshop. And you know, straight off the way, just to change and set the environment on the conditions of the environment that I want.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, that absolutely. It just kind of triggers like, oh, this is something different.
Yeah.
Like even by asking everybody to stand up, it's like, this is going to be a little different. Yeah.
Right. So does anybody else, before we close off, any? So it seems like that was the biggest question, Dana.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you to Dana for sharing today. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Also, thank you for joining us, bringing your energy, enthusiasm.